Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is session number 16 in our series. Started as what is a library if the building is closed, and now in round two as libraries in response, moving from the existential to the active voice here as we try to figure out what it is that libraries are trying to do and accomplish in dealing with this extraordinary set of circumstances. Move back to slides. So here we are. We are hosted today and every day or every session by the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. And at the controls for our Zoom is Stephen Weiber in the Netherlands with IFLA. And thank you yet again, IFLA and Stephen, for hosting these sessions, supporting them. Stephen also is our principal note taker. So the follow-up notes that you're getting are principally authored by Stephen, who does a very good job of capturing the highlights of the sessions. We have a media co-host or sponsor, Broadband Breakfast, very active in dealing with a whole range of broadband issues. These are all recorded and available on the pandemic response page at giglibraries.net. Question today, what is a library kiosk? Everyone, if you could mute, please, that'd be great. What is a library kiosk? Michael, if you could mute, it'd be appreciated. A kiosk has emerged as an interesting concept in providing access. As you may recall, we subdivided the topic of what is a library into what we thought were interesting and relevant aspects of the question in terms of internet access, digital services, physical materials, and social infrastructure. So these are, we think, a reasonable taxonomy to explore different aspects of the question, what is a library? And the question about internet access is an important one we're going to explore, especially today. We have a great lineup of speakers. We're going to also plumb the depths in TV Whitespace, one of the wireless technologies we've been exploring in the series. Our speakers, Matt Delany, Shirley Apley, and Stephen Hauser, are users of TV Whitespace and have been participating and deploying these networks for the last couple of years. And Bob Bocher, senior fellow with ALA, is going to be on when we get into some aspects related to eligibility. So, as I mentioned, this is part of a wireless thread that we initiated 3 weeks ago, I guess, with Michael Calabrese from the New America Foundation Open Technology Institute, gave us an overview of these various wireless resources. And we're taking these up one by one. So last week, if you'll recall, Diane Connery was on. I think I saw Diane on now, telling us about a project she's doing in Texas using educational broadband services spectrum, which is a special variety. I won't describe it because we recorded it, and there's a good explanation of it from last week and how she's using it in a partnership with a local wireless ISP to reach students without other access. Today, we're going to plumb the depths on TV Whitespace. Next week, we're looking to explore citizens band radio spectrum and also 5 and 6 gigahertz. 5 gigahertz is what you may recognize as one of the ordinary Wi-Fi standards, and 6 gigahertz is an emerging standard because 5 gigahertz is filling up. There's lots and lots of Wi-Fi routers, and they all have to share the same frequency space. But the point is then, what of these types of assets exist in your particular environment, because they don't exist everywhere. There's not TV white space everywhere. CBS licenses are not available everywhere. So knowing what you do have in your local environment and how it would operate is valuable knowledge. And we suggest everybody check that out, whether you try to do it yourself or are acquiring services from a provider, contracting for something. The more you know, the better off you're going to be. But finally, we're talking about library Wi-Fi, how to deliver access using Wi-Fi, the principal connectivity that we use that is not wireline or a cell system. Cells, of course, is a big deal, but library Wi-Fi is principally what libraries deliver and what so many people depend on. Roughly 80 million people depend on that. So we're going to get into TV white space here. Basically, it's this low power, long range frequency that was opened up when they converted to digital TV. And so I am going to attempt to play a 2-minute video, if you will indulge me here. We'll see.
America, public libraries are buzzing with activity. More people are using public libraries in more ways than ever before. In fact, some 80 million rely in part or entirely on public libraries for broadband internet access. In 2/3 of U.S. towns, libraries are the only source of no-fee internet access. But now, we're going beyond library walls. That's right, library Wi-Fi can support new hotspots in key locations in your community, thanks to the power of TV white spaces.
Wait, what are TV white spaces?
Well, years ago, TV broadcasts used analog signals, which were large and spaced far apart. Now, with the switch to digital, TV signals are much more compact and closer together. The unused space that remains in between these channels, that's TV white spaces. They can power Wi-Fi networks with supercharged signals that deliver broadband miles away, passing through obstructions like
Don, we can't see the video.
And even over small hills.
Well, that is unfortunate.
Yes, you need to share the screen.
Thought I had. Thank you.
Oh, and then point to the right video.
Yeah, well,
on your screen.
That looks better.
You see that?
Yes.
That looks better.
I'm going to take this back just a little bit.
Unused space that remains in between these channels, that's TV white spaces. They can power Wi-Fi networks with supercharged signals that deliver broadband miles away, passing through obstructions like buildings, trees, and even over small hills. Hotspots can be fixed at locations like public book kiosks, parks, playgrounds, and even public buildings. And they're easy to move, too. Movable TV white space hotspots can turn occasional fairs and markets into free public Wi-Fi zones. As one example, in Manhattan, Kansas, the hotspot goes between the community swimming pool and the ice rink as the seasons change. And if disaster strikes, these remote communications units can be redeployed to quickly assist rescue and recovery. You can increase your community's emergency preparedness by installing units at other community anchors, schools or clinics, for example, creating a backup communications resource that's vital for disaster relief. As a traditional source of public information, libraries are ideal as community labs to pilot this technology and are poised to unlock the revolutionary potential of TV white spaces and Wi-Fi together.
Okay. Sorry about that. So we're back. So I've turned off screen share. Thank you. Sorry for the snafu there. So now we will get into actual utilization on TV Whitespace and how it's being used in 3 different communities. And we're going to start with Millinocket, Maine, and Matt Delany. Matt was named Librarian of the Year in 2018 when he took the lead there in a really interesting circumstance in a small town, Millinocket, of once was 8,000, now it's 4,000, when their principal employer, a paper mill, closed after the financial crash. They say we were a one-horse town where the horse died. So it's no longer and never has been dead, and it's reviving itself, and Matt is a big part of that. So Matt, take it away and welcome.
Thank you, Don. Can you hear me all right?
Hear you fine.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks everyone for letting me share this. So that video that we just watched was my first exposure to TV Whitespace. I had no idea really what it was. So that was really helpful a few years ago when I first saw that video. My background is really not at all in technology. It's not at all in technology. I can do some basic stuff, but I wasn't familiar with that. And just to expand a little bit on what Don had just said about Millinocket, I worked in New York libraries in upstate New York for many years until I read about this small town, Millinocket, Maine, which I'd never been to, which is in central northern Maine, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the woods. And I'd read a story that this town was kind of closing down. The library had been shut down, the Millinocket Memorial Library. And they lost all funding from the town, and the all staff was laid off, and the building was shuttered. And a group of concerned citizens raised a little bit of money, enough to hire one person for 1 year to try to bring the library back online. So the stakes were pretty high, and it was an interesting project. And I visited Millinocket, and I saw that there were a lot of people that were interested in getting the library going. There was just very little money, but there were some opportunities and assets there. One of those was that in Maine, there's the library was connected through the Maine school library network we had a gigabit connection coming into the building. But it was largely, when the building shut down, it wasn't being used, obviously. And all of the equipment inside the library was 10 years old. It just hadn't been updated. So our immediate thought was, how can we bring immediate real value to the community with the limited resources that we have, which included a building, volunteers, a very fast internet connection, some public trust, and there was a lot of opportunity in thinking about how the library could play a role in the revitalization of the region. What once was a paper mill town was slowly transforming into more of a recreation destination. There's a national monument nearby, a beautiful state park. So we were seeing a lot of tourism in the area, but there was also a tension between tourism as a viable economy for the people that were remaining here. And as Don mentioned, the town had gone from about 8,000 to about 4,000. So there's just a lot of work to do. We learned about a grant opportunity to get some TV Whitespace equipment, but the problem was we didn't really have any expertise. All of our volunteers, or few of our volunteers, had any technical knowledge. But when we learned what was possible with it, it seemed worth putting out some feelers and seeing what we could put together to set up this system. As it turned out, let me try to share my screen. Probably, let's see, share screen. Okay, can you all see my screen now?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. I just threw up, you can see a little bit of our library here on the left, small library, about 9,000 square feet. And our mission is to enrich lives by building community, inspiring imaginations, and empowering people through lifelong learning. this is where Millinocket is. You can see it kind of central northern Maine. There's the closest city is Bangor, about an hour and 15 minutes away. So it was kind of amazing that we had such fast internet connected to this building, and we wanted to see how we could leverage that. So we were able to purchase some equipment, and I'll show you a map of our town. What was helpful is you can see the yellow dot is where the library is located, and it's actually the highest point in town. So we initially had 3 locations where we wanted to set up these hotspots. Hotspot location number 1 is a public park where there's festivals. Millinocket is the last town on the Appalachian Trail, so we have festivals when through hikers come through, and we can get, we can exceed the population of our town in just people coming in from outside for festivals and music. So that's one congregating location, hotspot number 1. Hotspot number 2 is adjacent to the school and a public pool and a football field. So our strategy was to identify areas where people are already gathering, and certainly like bridging the digital divide and connecting people to high-speed internet was a goal for this project. But the broader goal was to make the library relevant. We had less than 1 year of operating funds left, and I was the only staff, so we needed to kind of make a splash, and we needed to demonstrate to our town council, to our businesses, to our residents that the library was doing more than what it had for the last 100 years. Ironically, we were about at our 100-year anniversary when the library closed. So we wanted to not have to put a lot of energy into drawing people to a place that they didn't otherwise go. We instead wanted to go where people were and bring free Wi-Fi to them. We had a 3rd location, and it ended up not being a viable location because there wasn't a clear enough line of sight. There were too many obstructions, and so we were never able to get hotspot number 3 up and running. But hotspot number 1 and 2 became really popular, and I mean, so the way that we were able to actually pull it off was, as it turned out, somebody recently had retired to Millinocket. Let me stop screen sharing, actually. Somebody with a background in communications technology and was a Department of Defense contractor for his career had just relocated to Millinocket. So he helped us really figure out how to spec out what we needed. We ended up purchasing Adaptrum equipment and working with a Maine company called Axiom Technologies to actually install all of the hardware. Install all of the hardware. I think it took us, 6 months maybe once we got the grant to get everything up and running. We saw a huge impact in terms of, we'd see thousands of unique connections each month, mostly people coming from out of town. And one of the first early experiences of Millinocket was seeing fast, free Wi-Fi in our area at a time when the town was trying to be more welcoming to new residents and businesses coming in. So it also, because we were next to the school, we were able to allow kids to connect and do things like that. So I will just say that this was our first small grant that we received that we were able to leverage to a series of other grants. We were able to, with demonstrating what we were able to accomplish with TV Whitespace and getting people to think about the library in a new and different way, we were able to upgrade our IT. We were able to start a gear library where we lend out bicycles, snowshoes, skis, canoes, kayaks. And ultimately, all of those we were able to stack to the point where we were able to raise about $2 million and renovate our entire library, which we are opening hopefully in the next 3 or 4 weeks. We've been under construction for the last 8 months or so. So this was sort of the first way that we showed our town a new way of thinking about libraries. And it has led to, to think how far we've come in 3 years, it's kind of remarkable. But a big part of that is of course, in a rural place, our ability to connect people to the world around them. That was not really a possibility. So I'll I'll pause there, and I look forward to hearing from Stephen and Shirley, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about our experience with TV Whitespace.
That's great, Matt. And you know what you didn't mention that you do have there is initiative and a refusal to just sort of roll over and just take what happens. So great. Well, I'm sure we're having some questions. We'll try to maybe do those at the end of the 3 presentations. Shirley Apley from Huron, South Dakota, you're up. This is the first to have Shirley on to talk about it, as well as Matt's first time visitor to the program. Shirley, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
I want to also thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak about our TV Whitespace to everybody. I had just seen a small paragraph in some professional publication, and because I'm a TV repairman's daughter, I looked at it and I said, I understand this technology. And I talked to my assistant director, who is also our technology librarian, and I said, do you think we could do this? And she did some reading. She says, I think we should give it a try. So we put in the application, and we were amazed that we were chosen. One of the reasons that we wanted this is that Huron has a population of 14,000, a county population of about 20,000. We are a refugee city for the Korean population that's coming out of Myanmar and Thailand. So we have actually 9 different languages that are spoken within our city limits. We have been having difficulty getting the Korean into our library, but we noticed that they really like technology. So what we did with our TV Whitespace is we put one of the receivers at the soccer field. They're very big in soccer. In fact, the soccer industry in our community has blossomed because of them. And the other place we put one was in a popular park that they were going to. The third place was a park down by the river where a lot of them go fishing. And we were hoping that with these 3 locations that we would be able to tap into them and let them know that the library's here, and at some point maybe they would say, what is this library? What can it do for us besides just giving us free Wi-Fi? And interestingly enough, when we started watching our statistics, when they were running soccer tournaments, all of a sudden the usage just blossomed. And then we started getting people coming in asking for library cards. So it has been beneficial for us on that. We did have some problems when we had first received the grant. We, in the application process, you have to get written statement from your internet service provider that it's okay to participate in this. And we did. And we thought, oh, great. And then when they notified us that we had won, and before we signed all the papers, I thought, you know, we better ask them again. And we did. And we got written permission on that stuff. But as soon as I sent in the papers, then one man at the our internet service provider company just put the kibosh on us. And we fought and fought and fought. And finally, he left the company, and we have been having good success with it. However, if you can qualify for E-rates, I would say definitely look into that. E-rates for internet service for us, because of our Korean population, and it's attached to your school lunch program, and our superintendent keeps excellent statistics. Our E-rates would have been just dirt cheap to get a T1 line into the library, and from there, the TV Whitespace, the Wi-Fi would have been projected out. So definitely look into it if you qualify, because you could get some quality lines coming into your library. Interestingly, we have been going along with our service. In the wintertime, we shut down service to the football or the soccer fields, But we kept it open at the one park because of the skating ring that was there. And the unit is on the picnic shelter that is enclosed, so people could use, when they're warming up, they could still access internet inside the building. When COVID-19 and the pandemic started, we didn't have any of the service turned on, except for that shelter. And we decided that we've got something here that can help people, because all of a sudden the school shut down. They were doing things via Wi-Fi at home, teaching the kids. And because our third area that we wanted to use it at, we were having problems with the hospital building being in the way, and we hadn't quite figured out how to move it so that we could bypass the hospital. I just offered it to our local COVID committee, saying, you're setting up the checking station, we can get Wi-Fi to you. And they took us on, and we had gotten the equipment all ready to go and everything. And then the internet company came in and wired internet service into the building. But we were ready to go, and I wanted to see it work. The pandemic, as we all know, has been giving us changes in our lives. The local school has been calling and talking to us about our TV Whitespace, as well as our hotspots that we have for the public. And they're interested in, if they have to shut down again, how we can use our TV Whitespace. Can we, like the soccer fields in the wintertime, can we adjust our antenna and receiver so we can beam it into a building where they can have students come in on a schedule and be socially distanced and still be able to have their classes. So we're willing to talk to them about that. And I see this as a future technology, especially for South Dakota, because we're so rural. The state library has been monitoring us, and they're getting ready to invest in some TV Whitespace equipment and use it West River, where, I mean, the main population in the town may be 100 people, but yet they're wanting to get the state library's databases out to these communities. So I really think that this is something that has been very advantageous to us, and I'm hoping that other people will jump on board and get to know the technology. And by the way, when we were awarded the grant, I went out and found the only TV Whitespace textbook on Amazon. I bought it, and you cannot borrow it from us. We're not releasing it whatsoever. So.
Thank you, Shirley. That's great. That actually turned into quite a commercial. I appreciate that. We're not in the business of TV Whitespace, but it's something that we have explored. And you make a number of interesting points, that it's not perfect. Matt made a similar point. It won't go through mountains. It's tolerant to obstructions, but it can go through the tree tops, but not through the trees, as or the forest, one way to sort of look at it. We'll come back to these. There's a question from Tom Rolfes for Matt. Let's hear from Stephen, and then we'll take a whole bundle of questions about this. Shirley also mentions the E-rate question, which is a good one, and we're going to take that up as a principal topic after Stephen. So Stephen, you're there. You're up.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Tom.
All right, Stephen Hauser from Milledgeville, Georgia.
Yeah.
Another state state librarian of the year this year. Stephen returning. He was with us earlier in the year for another rapid presentation. We're going to get you on, Stephen, for a full half hour or sometime here coming up. But we really appreciate you coming back, and especially on short notice. And so tell us how it's working for you guys there.
Sure. It's my pleasure to be on today. I'm going to talk briefly about our implementation and some of our future plans. A little bit of background about Milledgeville. We are rural community, but we are also a former state capital. That means that we have
Lost your sound.
sales. Can't hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Not well. Not well. He was just saying that Milledgeville is a former state capital of Georgia. I guess that was during the Civil War, as I recall. Can you check your mic now, Stephen?
Yeah, can you hear me at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Not now.
Apologize.
Off and on.
Off and on, okay. Don, can you give me a few seconds? I may rearrange and see what I can do. I'm gonna go off screen.
All right. Sure. So I'll provide a little context for TV Whitespace, that this was all done as a liberation of spectrum that was formerly used for TV broadcast, radio broadcast. And you'll recall years and years ago now, we converted to digital TV broadcast. That freed up spectrum that is suitable for data communication. That was the dream, that was the idea. This was first implemented or voted on 5-0 at the FCC in 2008. And then it's been a long progression of what they call repacking, that is to say, moving the broadcasters around on the channels to open up more spectrum on channels that are contiguous. It's better to have channel 32 and 33 and 34 all open than it is to have 26, 31, and 35. Just it's more economical. As I say, it's new, it's still evolving, but it's getting pretty mature now. But there's a recent shift in these channels again, and so the database for what's available has moved a little bit. But I think we're in the final stages. It's not everywhere. It's not in the cities because they're all filled up with broadcasters. But the more rural you are, the more of this, to Shirley's point, the more of this spectrum is available. And that's what got us excited, because it's exactly the opposite of where infrastructure typically is or is not in rural areas. So counterintuitively, or rarely, it's a boon for places with the least infrastructure have the greatest amount of this resource, this free resource. You don't have to pay anybody to use this, like ordinary Wi-Fi. You just have equipment that uses these frequencies. This is long range, that's its special advantage, and it's tolerant to obstructions, as we mentioned, and that's its other main benefit. And as Shirley also mentioned, these remote units can be set up to be portable, to be moved around. As we saw in the video in Manhattan, Kansas, they had one they moved between their swimming pool and their ice rink. But once they moved it from one place, the people went to the ice rink in the summer, it's another area, and they go, well, what happened to Wi-Fi? So they added a fourth unit there. We'll talk about that in a second. Stephen, are you mic'd yet? I guess
audible.
Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to try this without video. I apologize for that. If you're ready, I'll try my presentation again.
You're still kind of in and out. So there are a number of these projects around the country. We were fortunate enough to win an IMLS grant and put out a call for proposals. And in 2017, we were able to fund about a half a dozen of these projects, and you're hearing from 3 of them. And
yeah, can you help me out real quick?
Paul, we can hear Paul. And we had done some projects prior to that. We before this technology was actually commercially available, we had some systems go out. One was in Colorado, Paonia, a little town in Colorado, and they set up a couple of remotes. One was in the park, common place to put these, and the other one was in their main street, where it's just like 1 block long, Main Street, and they had a street concert there, and they have a local radio station who wanted to webcast the street concert, and so they announced during the concert that that the webcast was being sponsored by the local library, and the crowd lets up a cheer for the library. This doesn't happen often outside of a library conference. You get a cheer for the library, but it's just another case. The systems, all the ones we're talking about today, these simple systems, are less than $10,000 at the current level, and the prices are continuing to fall. And that's for the whole system. That's all the radios, the cables, the antennas, and everything. And in the Colorado project, it was about $6,000. They had one contributor donate $2,000 after they had a budget cut right in the middle of their their purchase activity, and then they set up a GoFundMe campaign, and they raised the other $4,000 in 2 weeks. And it was interesting because not only did it raise money, it raised awareness that the library is reaching out into the community to provide services. And that's what kind of we think is cool about this, is it's a way for the library to extend itself into the community, have a physical presence, even though this is kind of allows digital services, but it's a physical place. And like in Shirley's example, it's a way to let people know about the library. And if you set it up with a splash page, saying this is welcome to the library, where would you like to go? You'd like to go to the internet, want to go, library digital services and so forth. It tends to pull people into the library itself, or it did when they were open. But even so, it's still a way to provide, access not only to the internet, but to other services. How are we doing, Stephen?
You tell me, Don.
That sounds good.
Okay, I apologize, and many thanks for bearing with me through all that.
Take her away.
All right, let's try this again. Everybody see my screen just fine?
Yeah, and you sound good too.
Okay, yeah, I had to connect by my phone, so apologies if my children decide it's a good time to come in. That may actually happen. In fact, that almost always happens. Let's see if I can make this full screen. Now you have to bear with me while I do all this. Now this doesn't want to work for me. All right, that's good enough.
Yeah.
So anyways, former state capital, antebellum capital of Georgia. We have several colleges and prisons because of that. We are home to Central State Hospital, which was once the world's largest mental hospital. They had somewhere around 20,000 patients at one time. Currently, our city population is about 20,000, county about 46,000, and that's our service area. So we've had a decrease in population, but we've been steady the last couple of years. So apart from the central town core, we are mostly rural. I came on about 2014 as director, and immediately noticed that we did have some issues, both with the library not serving certain segments of the population and being very based on a central location without expanding our reach into the surrounding area, and also that we had relatively impoverished county as well, especially in certain pockets. And then looking at some of the broadband coverage, you'll see on the top here that we have the FCC's methodology and where they determine where broadband is available in our area. And you'll see on the bottom, we've had a recent initiative from the state government, the Georgia Broadband Development Initiative, to use a different methodology to map and see where that availability is. And you'll see there's a stark contrast here. My experience, the bottom map is more correct. I think this shows certain corridors where we do have reliable internet access for people to use broadband, and many areas where we don't. So this is kind of a need that we thought we'd step into. As Matt and Shirley said, it's also a way for the library to reach out to new segments of the community that we weren't reaching before. So we started with working with Adaptrum and with this grant, looking at our coverage area. You can see the red in the center is our library. We have 3 locations that we've deployed to. We have the Oconee Greenway, which is half a mile away, Central City Park, which is approximately a mile away, Hewley Park, which is a mile and a half away. And then we were looking at another location that was a little over 2 miles away, but the coverage was not adequate there. We ran into some issues. We still have some issues with our northernmost park, the Hewley Park location. We are actually about 90 miles southeast of Atlanta, and we get some TV interference from that, which is kind of phenomenal when you think about it. But anything to the kind of north and west of us is problematic right now. This is kind of our timeline. We applied for the grant based on the recommendation of our state librarian. We were announced as a winner in May 2017. And then in 2019, we had our equipment installed. So you'll see there's a little gap there. I think because of the newness of this technology and the fact that we couldn't find an appropriate installer, even working with the vendor for quite a while to get that set up, it took a while to get it implemented. And really, we had to utilize some local folks that were just really intrigued by this technology and get that installed. But we went live in May 2019. We were very happy about that. So quickly, here's our base station. You can see that we have chimney flue there. Ignore that. There's a white bit of technology on the corner. So that's the base station. We have 3 of these, so they're pointing in different directions based on the direction of our parks that we have that we're shooting the signal to. And I think you'll determine, by the way, I'm hesitating over this. I'm like, Matt, I'm a little bit into technology. I'm not an expert by any means. And here's the client radio. This is on a light pole that we have in our greenway. This is something that we have to pay a nominal fee to our local power utility company to attach to the pole. But it's totally worth it. This is actually our most used site. It's a very popular area, popular with a lot of the college students and families. People kayak and canoe on it. It's relatively busy, at least before COVID hit. And then this is actually the one we have our greatest speeds. So usage, I think, is something that I want to talk about briefly. We had, before COVID, about 2,000 site sessions per month. So that's over the 3 of these, but the main one being the Greenway. And considering the size of our town, this is quite healthy numbers, I think. But that dropped precipitously after COVID hit. A number of those losses and usage can be probably attributed to the college students that we have returning home to the Atlanta suburbs, where a lot of them come from. There's some other factors at play as well, but I think for us, that's the main one. So one of the things that we're excited about is we're able to kind of combine this grant with another one that we were working on to help develop a mobile unit for TV Whitespace. We called it the Community Voice Box. It is reuse of a pay telephone that we're going to use to help drive community interactivity and engagement and offer prizes for participation. And the thing that we're going to mount it in, you can see from this drawing here, and these pictures on the right, is a rather massive steel structure that is actually not going to be mobile. This is our prototype that we're going to stick at one of our main branches, just because it's so huge. It's over 8 feet tall. But it's going to be wrapped in a vinyl decoration. It's going to be lit, and it'll have that pay telephone there in the center. And this will be solar powered. The idea is that if we get the technology right with this, we're going to make a smaller version that we can tote around to various areas, have seasonal or maybe temporary installations, and really hope to drive that interactivity. Now, unfortunately, we had this idea for using the pay telephone before COVID. It's not probably the best idea to have people or to encourage people to come up and put their hands all over this, and the next person do the same thing. So we're kind of rethinking about how this might look in the future. But we think its use as a Wi-Fi hotspot is still valid and still something we're going to pursue. So that's it for me. I guess I'll open up to questions or questions for the other presenters.
That's great, Stephen. This idea of a physical station with an interface, a touch screen or something like that, is interesting. I mean, it's pretty much the same issue we have with ATM machines. You could rely on people to, either use a glove or something, or wipe. You could have some hand wipes, I guess, beside the thing if you wanted, or like you say, it just may be inappropriate for the moment. You're still screen sharing if you'd like to take that off. We've got a number of questions here. Sean asked about the cost. All these systems, the hardware was under $10,000. In the grant, we just open it up for the applicants to choose their vendor. There aren't many. There are just really a handful, and these 3 all chose the same one, Adaptrum. out of Silicon Valley. They've been very active in supporting this campaign, and they do a good job. But it's not perfect. There's another project that we're trying to support that's trying to get started in Arizona, in southern Arizona. And there's a really good environment, plenty of spectrum. The setup went great. But then they realized that the equipment didn't accommodate their virtual LAN requirements, the security requirements of the city under which the library operates. So this has required the company to build some firmware to accommodate the city's security requirements, which is entirely reasonable, but it's been a delay in the issue. The other systems, somehow it didn't really come up, or there was a kind of a workaround. But in the case of the Arizona project, the city IT department is very clear and very strict about their security needs, which is understandable. There's so much, malware ransomware being distributed. So it looks like they're closing in on that the software fix is being tested right now, and we're very hopeful about that. So these are not without, glitches. I don't know of a technology project that doesn't have some kind of an issue. The connectivity issue that Matt touched on and Shirley touched on in terms of it won't reach everywhere. I think in Matt's case, it was a hill and a building that interrupted the point. There was a question that about range, Matt, and how far is the recreation field from the library?
Oh, I don't know, maybe a half mile. Yeah. I thought the question was, what's the range of the access point to the end user? And that's around like, yeah, that's probably like 50 yards, 50 meters. Yeah.
Ordinary Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly what it is. So everybody's kind of familiar with that range. If there are no obstructions, it can go 50 yards, 100 yards. And if you use high gain antennas, you can go a long way. You can go miles and miles if you have line of sight, which is the issue for most frequencies that are higher. They're easily interrupted. So, okay, good. Were there other questions about that? Let me do another share and add one more case to our conversation here. So this is a general kind of concept of it. Is you've got your base station, library in the center, and these remote locations around town. And then as the top of that circle, you can see that directional antenna that Stephen also showed, and that's a really good way to create an optimal signal back to the base station. One key point about this that may not be clear to everybody is this is an in-house network. There are no third parties here. There are no licenses. There's no permissions. There's no fees. It's just the cost of the equipment and the setup, which can vary. I mean, some of these have been done by staff, and others have contracted out to help them set up. But once they're set up, they're pretty stable, and they're not as sensitive as directional antennas to changes and the shifting around a little bit. So this is from Manhattan, Kansas, one of the early projects where they set up these four. It was mentioned in the video. Community center, and then 3 recreational sites. And that's the park, and they put up a sign there, which we advocate. It's a physical sign. You're in a library service zone, and welcome to it. Let's see. Oh, okay, sorry, duplicate slides. So this is their data usage that they did one year, showing how much data went through these remotes and how much came through the basic library. And you can see there in the summer that the data usage exceeded the Maine library data usage. In that case, this was so popular that the city decided they would just simply run fiber to all 4 locations. So we consider that a win for wireless, and a typical kind of a result where wireless creates connectivity, which generates a demand for capacity. And this is a key point, is that if you provide people with access, they'll want more. They'll want more, you know, they want to run their 4K cat videos, but they'll be happy they can do email and, you know, basic web pages. And it's a strategy to extend access that so many people depend on. We have created this database of libraries using the IMLS master database, a cross-reference to a Whitespace database to find roughly 5,000 libraries, mostly almost all rural, that have lots of unused white space. And this is available by state on request. Send us an email and we'll be happy to. The point that we're making about Kiosk, which we're going to get into right now, is the notion that these remote stations can be a really good idea if they were designated as kiosk, an official USAC E-rate designation for a type of a outlet, like a branch and a bookmobile and a type of annex. Who designates an annex is the state library. And this is the point here, is that we want to encourage every state library to publish a definition of a kiosk. The Library of Michigan has one. They're not that common. Theirs says a kiosk shall be in a public location. It shall have Wi-Fi. It shall have an embedded device, the way Stephen is developing those. This is, of course, what they had before. Maybe it's not appropriate now. And that's it. It needs to be part of a system, right? A branch has to be part of a system. But other than that, that's it. It doesn't have to handle physical materials, doesn't check out books and deliver books. So given how many people depend on libraries for access, not just to the internet, but to the library services and other government services, the idea that there should be one within walking distance of everybody in every neighborhood, kind of a combination of a pay phone, an emergency call box, and an access point. So it's not just for, you know, downloading videos, which is great, but also if something happens, you know, your phone is out, your phone's your only connection, where do you go? You know, to have a place like that you could walk to could be tremendously valuable. How do we know if it's E-rate eligible? Big question. We get this a lot. It doesn't necessarily have to be, because the cost is low enough that it should, you know, just paying for it directly is pretty justifiable when you consider the value of internet access and access to digital services as a part of the value of the whole library, especially today. Then you know, a couple of $1,000s or less for a new access point is a bargain. But how do we really know? We need to ask Bob. So Bob Bocher is with us. Bob is an ALA fellow and one of the top national experts on E-rate. So Bob, here I'm going to stop share and ask you to weigh in on this idea of am I coming through?
Yes, fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Sorry, I thought my screen froze for a second there. I thought I'd been talking for a few minutes with nobody. So welcome,
Okay.
Bob, welcome back. And so can you kind of run us down on the implications here for eligibility and you know,
Sure.
we're trying to activate a campaign. We want to have as much knowledge about what we're up against as possible.
Sure. First of all, from a background perspective, I appreciate Don asking me to be part of the program today. I spent many years working for the Wisconsin State Library and State Education Department, and Wisconsin State Library is part of the Education Department. Working on broadband connectivity. I've been working with the E-rate since its inception when it passed as part of the 1996 Telecommunication Act. I worked a lot to move schools and libraries off dial access, which many of them had in the mid-90s, to broadband connectivity. I retired from full-time work in 2012, but I still work for the state library and education agency here in Madison, where I'm based, on E-rate issues and broadband issues. From a national perspective, as Don mentioned, I'm a fellow or a consultant with the American Library Association, where again, I work a lot on E-rate broadband connectivity and other issues like net neutrality. What I would like to do today is just start from the E-rate perspective and then move into some of the issues that libraries confront, especially as we're in the middle of this pandemic. At the risk of oversimplification, from the E-rate perspective, I'm assuming that most people are at least familiar with it in a general perspective. You have to be an eligible entity, and this gets back to Don's point in relationship to kiosks and bookmobiles, and that eligible entities, be it a traditional library that we're all familiar with, or some of the other service outlets like bookmobiles or kiosks, as Don again mentioned, is defined by the state library. So that is in your state statute someplace. So for folks that are out there in any given state, if they aren't certain if a bookmobile or a kiosk is eligible as a library and therefore eligible for E-rate discounts in their respective state, you probably want to look either at your state statutes or just contact someone in the state library there, and they'll be able to tell you one way or another. You know, from that perspective, I did send a note out about a week and a half ago to the state library E-rate coordinators. This is a group that ALA helps to coordinate. And I got quite a few responses. I was asking if bookmobiles were eligible in their respective states. And probably 20, 25 responses I got out of the 50 states. Most of them, probably 3/4, said that bookmobiles are considered to be public libraries in their states. The answer on the kiosk was much more mixed. Quite a few states said they didn't really consider kiosks to be eligible. And Don noted in the case of Michigan, they have a definition. We have a definition in Wisconsin as well. So again, in the vast majority of cases, bookmobiles are in good shape as far as being E-rate eligible. It's a little bit less so from the kiosk perspective. Another thing I did, I noted that in my work in Wisconsin that bookmobiles, you know, unfortunately, primarily because of budget considerations, there are fewer of them being operated now than in past years. And the Institute of Museums and Library Services collects data on a regular annual basis on library services throughout the country. And I just went back and looked at some of their stats going back 20 years ago, just as a point of information. In 1997, we had nationwide 948 bookmobiles in operation. And the latest data that IMLS has from 2017, that dropped down to 672. So we've seen a drop of about 30% over the last 2 decades as far as bookmobiles are concerned. And in Wisconsin too, we've seen a drop off about half the numbers of bookmobiles now than we had back in the late 1990s. So I want to move forward a little bit here and take a look at library access to the internet and then allowing that access to be used by patrons in their given community. You know, as the pandemic was developing in mid and late March, the FCC put out an announcement that, and I'm going to paraphrase here from it, that said, okay, during this pandemic, schools and libraries are closed, which they know, because the mission of the public library is to allow public access to E-rate funded services like the internet, even when they are closed to the public. This is allowed during the pandemic. Now, everyone is pleased to see this. It wasn't necessarily a new rule or regulation from the FCC. It was just confirming what they've always allowed is access when the library building is closed, like in the evening, for example, or perhaps on weekends. The same thing from the school perspective. But the real kicker, the limitation here also is mentioned then in this news release when it said this access, for example, when the library is closed, can only be done while a patron or member of the public is on a school or library property. So again, this is nothing new. This has been an E-rate rule and regulation for quite a few years, but it takes that, you know, kind of good news, and that even though the library is closed, it can provide Wi-Fi access, but then severely limits it to the library's property, like a parking lot, or in the case of a school, perhaps an athletic field that may be next to the high school or the middle school. I should also note that in relation to Wi-Fi access, even though it's severely limited at this point in time, the Public Library Association did a survey not too long ago, and they found that 83% of the respondents, we have about 16,500 library outlets in the country, 83% said that even though the vast majority are closed now, unfortunately, they do have their Wi-Fi still functional and it's still working, and people are out in the parking lot getting Wi-Fi access. Now, this whole issue of the limitation to access being only on the library property has been a very contentious issue, again, especially since the pandemic broke back in mid-March, because again, it severely limits that access by patrons and especially by those students from the K-12 perspective that don't have access in their households. We, from the ALA perspective, and a lot of state library and education agencies and other organizations have been pressing the FCC to make a more liberal interpretation of this, again, especially during the pandemic, to allow internet access off of library or school property. But the FCC has been unwilling to move on that, saying that in looking at the language that established the E-rate back in 1996, it simply doesn't allow or have that statutory authority. So what we've seen over the past couple of months is the introduction in Congress of, well, at least there's 5 or 6 bills now pending that all have something in common, and the point they have in common is to allow a school or library to use its E-rate funded broadband internet connectivity off of school or library property. There's a bill pending out there by Representative Meng from New York, by Senator Markey on the Senate side from Massachusetts. The House passed the HEROES bill here about a month or so ago. Again, they all have this language in them. And also, I should note that ALA is a member of the Shelby Coalition. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Shelby, the Schools, Health, Libraries, Broadband Coalition. Shelby also has a bill out there that ALA has supported and endorsed, and our Department of Education here in Wisconsin has done so, and hundreds of other schools and libraries have. And again, that also specifically allows access off campus by those households primarily in the community that don't have access. So when we're talking about TV white spaces today, like I said, the good news is that's much more robust as far as connectivity is concerned, to allow access well beyond the traditional signal that a Wi-Fi router can supply. But unfortunately, at this point in time, at least from an E-rate perspective, we're still dealing with that restriction that it has to be accessible on a school or library's property. So Don, that's just a quick overview for folks this morning. Certainly, if people have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and I think I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Bob, and I'm sure we'll have some questions here. The point is, you make the point about on the property, on a library property. So it's difficult to imagine how you get on a kiosk, which is a library annex. The language is really clear about annexes and outbuildings and such as that. And kiosks specifically are treated identically with bookmobiles. Now, you can imagine how you could be on a bookmobile, but not today. It's difficult to imagine how you could be on a book. You could be at a bookmobile. And imagine a library kiosk in City Hall, a stand-up unit, something like what Stephen was showing. It's a property. It's not a library property. It's that definition is kind of vague, right? And especially now as they've started to say, you can spread the signal farther from the library itself. They used to not really say that. You couldn't use it outside the building. It leaked out of the building and people used it and they didn't object, but now they've explicitly said beyond. So even as we deal with these ambiguities, there's an opportunity to create a consensus around the concept. And that's what we're trying to do. Daria made this point that IMLS, through their state data coordinators, should coordinate a national definition on the IMLS Public Library Survey of a kiosk. And then the state libraries could adopt that or modify it, but it would provide a lot of clarity. And I think it is absolutely up to the state libraries, as you said, to define what is a kiosk and an outlet and so forth. And this is different from the point about supplying students at home, from the school connectivity, which is a great idea. We support it, but we allow that does, require a clarification at least from the FCC. We're trying to make a decision on this case that it does not. And so rather than ask for, permission or something, we want to take the position that the permission is already granted. We're just asserting a definition that conforms to statutory language, and just challenge the FCC to say, oh, no, it doesn't because something. Okay, we'll enter that argument. So this is what, I don't know what's the best way to mobilize this, but what we would like to do is ask everybody here, and we'll do it in the follow-up email and the notes, is to contact your state library and ask them, do they have one? Why don't they have one? And how about making one? We just posted the link to the Library of Michigan definition. Bob, if Wisconsin has a definition, please post that in the chat. But that's a good standard to start with. And given the circumstances today, this is what's really pressing about this. Since you work in ordinary circumstances, the circumstances today where it's absolutely essential that everybody have some kind of access. You know, to be stuck at home and not be allowed to connect, it's just unthinkable. So
yes, I was going to say, I hope that in the next COVID bill, and Senator McConnell, of course, who is in charge of the Senate, said that they will take up another bill, and the next big COVID bill, if you will, when the Congress gets back in the session later in the month, either next week or the following week. So we're likely to see something come out of that. And I hope from a legislative perspective in relationship to at least this off-campus access, that these various bills that I just referenced a few minutes ago, that some of that language will be incorporated into whatever the next COVID bill includes, as far as maybe other infrastructure and aids to municipalities and whatever else is in there. So I think that's the hope, is that these bills will at least include that. But getting back to your kiosk point, that is again correct, that even if these bills allow off-campus access, it still has to be at an eligible location, if you will. And I do know that even though bookmobiles are closed now, just like school buses no longer transport students, there are communities that will park their bookmobile or school bus out in neighborhoods and allow access. And again, technically that's not to be discounted through the E-rate program, but they in fact are doing that because they realize that, looking at some of the statistics that are available to us, between about 8 million, maybe 9 million students are out there without access at home, primarily because of they don't have the funding to pay for it, or in some instances they're in rural areas where that access is simply rather poor, not available. The other thing I'll just quickly mention here is that, while a lot of these bills are focused on that homework gap, as we from the library perspective also want to point out, we have a lot of households out there without internet access that don't necessarily have K-12 students at home. So we have senior citizens out there that want to have decent access to keep in touch with their healthcare facility. We have people who have been laid off in their 30s or 40s age-wise that want to get decent internet access to upgrade their skills, and perhaps they're going to be looking at a different profession or a different job. So like I said, there's a lot of need out there for access, not just to address the specific homework gap. And when you said, getting back in touch with your state library, if I can put in a plug from a lobbying perspective in relationship to some of these bills, I would encourage people to go out to the Shelby website, take a look at that legislation that's out there, and if they feel so moved, to contact their House or Senate rep to, support that particular bill or some of those others that I referenced as well.
Absolutely, and we've had Shelby on. We have John Windhausen, of course. Yeah. We're a member of Shelby, and we pitched Shelby last week. They have a Spectrum group that Sean is leading, who's on now, and talked a little bit about. Our group has tried to focus more on projects than policy, but invariably projects run up against the boundaries of policy. And we think that's a benefit of doing, breakthrough projects, leading edge projects. You'll invariably come up against definitions and eligibility. There was a question here about Stephen saying something about state libraries. Stephen saying states cannot define kiosks as library branches. I don't believe so. As a matter of fact, the state library in Georgia is exploring a definition right now. I also want to make the point about TV Whitespace. Our topic today is TV Whitespace and kiosks, and they can go together, but they don't have to go together. And whatever connectivity you might use to connect the kiosk is separate from, TV Whitespace is just one option. You might use another frequency. You might, like I said, if you have line of sight, it'd probably be better to use 5 gigahertz, these directional antennas to get a real fast connection. But that's needing line of sight. So you have to figure out what you have, where you are in terms of spectrum, but that's separate from the kiosk question of whatever connectivity. And to the extent that these are actually eligible and declared and accommodate a definition, then presumably they could order a wireline connectivity, and that would be satisfied in the same way. We had one case in Lansing, Michigan, where the library wanted to set up 2 remotes in 2 community centers. One was a half a mile, one was a couple of miles away. The one that was 2 miles away, it turned out there was a lot of interference. Sometimes there are a lot of broadcasters in the area, and the signals are not clean enough. And so it just didn't really work for the one farther away facility. And so that was unacceptable reasonably to the library. And they said, well, we get a really good discount rate from our provider. We'll just subscribe to 2 DSL lines to each of those facilities. Okay, but they had never thought about extending physical presence in a service outside of the library before they started looking at wireless. So even though TV Whitespace didn't work, the concept worked, and we consider that a success as similar to the Manhattan, Kansas. We're over a little bit here. We started a little bit late, and we're now a little bit over an hour. So I think we can offer a final comment to any of our speakers before we stop the recording, and we'll go in the order that we started. Matt, are you still on? You like to have anything final to say? Or Matt is probably back busy. His wife just had a baby in the last few days, so he's a busy fellow. And thanks to Matt for making it. Shirley, any last comment?
Not really. I am totally sold on TV Whitespace, and I think we need to look into doing some kiosks around town with it. So,
okay, well,
stay tuned.
Let us know if we can help on that. Bring in your state librarian and encourage them to encourage their peers. That's what we're looking for, is a group of state librarians who are buying into this.
You mentioned one thing about with COVID and getting the Wi-Fi out to people and medical stuff. Interestingly, my mother, whose health is not good right now, they just set her up on a Wi-Fi system, and she's hooked up to a little laptop, and they're monitoring her on a minute-by-minute basis. So getting the Wi-Fi to people may be life-saving. So.
Absolutely could. We've mostly focused on public access, public information, and education, and partnering with schools. But health is absolutely a major application for connectivity, and one that Shelby focuses on at policy level. But it's a good idea. We should bring in someone to talk about the application of connectivity and home monitoring and so forth. Stephen, you still on? Final comment?
Yeah, still here. Just want to thank everybody for bearing with me. I don't know if you believe me, but that's the first time I've had these issues working from home in like 4 months.
I don't believe you.
So I do want to thank everybody for that. And like Shirley said, and I'm sure Matt would say as well, it's really been a boon to us. The relationship that we've had with the community has been improved because of this. We've had heavy usage. A lot of people are very grateful for it. Especially after COVID hit. And I want to thank those folks that sent the link to Link NYC. I'd missed those before, but these are converted payphones that offer free Wi-Fi and are very similar to what I have. And now all the neurons are firing all at once now, and I've got all that inspiration. So I want to thank everybody that sent me those links too.
That's good. That's a byproduct of having these is we learn from each other.
I sent it. I sent that link because although their New York City government has been doing a lot of things broadband, and they did this several years ago where they gave out a contract on all the payphones, they took down all the payphones and they gave out a contract to, but they're selling advertising, but that's
Right.
how they're recouping the free services. But it's the model that worked. I mean, it's what they built.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a famous story, Judith. Thank you. But of course, New York City is highly wired, and but if there is potential to utilize the existing wireline infrastructure that connects those devices, then the potential to turn a payphone into an access point is there. And there were a lot of issues around people camping out at these access points. Homeless people start just living there. It's understandable.
Well, yeah, that's why they originally had internet access available through plugging in, and they had to discontinue that because people are watching movies and everything. So all they have, you could still charge up your phone or device, but it's only free Wi-Fi. But it's also that you could use the device. It was meant for maps and to call
Right.
emergency and provide directions.
Tickets and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay, Bob. Last word.
Sure. Just 2 quick points. Just to reiterate, if people have any questions in relationship to bookmobile or kiosk eligibility from the E-rate side of things, by all means, get in touch with your state library. And from the federal perspective, again, I would encourage people to take a look at some of those bills that are out there that eliminate this whole, on-campus access only issue, and contact their legislators, encourage them to support these bills.
Great point, Bob. And this is an amplification on a principle from 10 years ago with the Stimulus Act. You'll recall open middle mile was the concept that we're spending billions of dollars to connect all these facilities, the schools, these libraries, these clinics, and so forth, and to restrict the use of that infrastructure just to those endpoints is missing a bet. I mean, we're spending a lot of money. It's reasonable to describe ways to share that, and not at the expense of the commercial providers, but yet even to benefit them, because they then become eligible to use a shared resource. We're spending money, we should leverage it, and especially now. And so Spectrum is another example of that. The FCC's, we spend all this time soliciting the FCC to provide more money to connect to anchor institutions, and they're sitting on piles of spectrum that doesn't cost them technically anything to provide. And so that's another part of the Shelby advocacy, is more open spectrum for public use, and we totally support that. So shlb.org, you can check all about it. We encourage you to join, and you'll have a voice into Washington, and you'll hear things directly out that are happening real time. The membership fee for an anchor institution, Bob, I think is under $500. I think if you're small enough, it's $250.
I think that's right.
Yeah, so that's a deal. We've been there. We're a founding member, and it's been an amazing experience, and it's growing. They just passed their 200 member mark, and so check it out. And with that commercial for Shelby, I think we'll close our recording. And thank you, everybody. Thank you. Can everybody unmute for a moment, please? Unmute.
Oh, we're clapping.
Okay, a little round of applause here for the. Okay, Stephen, thank you.